A very warm welcome to everybody who have all gathered here to discuss the Israeli aggression in Gaza and peace in the Middle East. Especially warm welcome to our three speakers, Ambassador Mustafa Kamal Kazi, Ambassador Karamatullah Ghori, whom we have taken online, and Professor Dr. Talat Wizarat. I'll say just a few words about Gaza and the conflict in the in Gaza today. As you all know, on the 7th of October, Hamas fired 5,000 rockets into Israel, penetrating its security shield and killing hundreds of civilians. They also took more than 200 hostages. Israel was bound to retaliate and has since let loose a reign of terror. The attack by Hamas was very well prepared. It was by land, air and sea, and it is said that it was a dark day for the intelligence in Israel. Hamas has been designated as a terrorist organization by the United States, the United Kingdom, the European Union, Japan, and all Western allies. But actually, the word stands for an Islamic resistance movement. It was established in 1987, and its first charter aimed at establishing an Islamic state throughout Palestine. But in 2017, it revised its charter to more liberal and modern terms. It has a military wing called the Izz-ud-Din al-Qassam Brigades, which has about 30,000 to 50,000 operatives, or you can call them fighters. Also in Gaza operates the Islamic Jihad movement, which has a military wing also called the Al-Quds Brigade, and is said to have 8,000 fighters. Gaza is rightly called a strip because it is a very narrow territory. You can see it on the map at the back, bordering on the Mediterranean Sea. It's a small sliver of a land, 41 kilometers long and 6 to 12 kilometers wide. It has been described by human rights groups as the largest open-air prison in the world. And it has been under siege of Israel since it was taken over by Hamas. It was home because so many people have been killed recently, to 2.2 million people, 70% of whom are refugees from the time of 1948 when Israel was established. It has been under Israeli siege since it was occupied in 1967 by Israel after the 1967 war, and it controls everything. Israel controls the airspace, passages, entrance and exit routes, and also access to the sea. The people of Gaza live in total poverty. They are deprived of clean drinking water. They are unemployed, and they are deprived of normal electricity. But even before Hamas was established, the Palestinians were victims of unspeakable oppression at the hands of Israel and their policy of settler colonialism. Every Jew who wants to can become a citizen of Israel. But the Palestinians who were thrown out or who fled in 1948 do not have the right to return. They cannot come back to Palestine. There has been a history of violence, occupation, and destruction. Following the 7th October strikes by Hamas, Israel asked the Gazans to move to the south, as if they had somewhere to go, to move to the south of Gaza. Israel's policy all along has been to establish normal relations with the surrounding Arab states and simply to ignore the Palestinian issue, to bypass it. The future of Israel in the view of Netanyahu, Prime Minister Netanyahu, is reflected in his speech which he made in the United Nations General Assembly in September, in which he showed a map of Palestine, a map of Israel, in which all the Palestinian territories were shown as part of Israel. That included Gaza, the West Bank, occupied Jerusalem, and even the Golan Heights. And after the strike by Hamas, he said that he would change the map of the Middle East forever. Since 2008, Israel has conducted 5 attacks on Gaza's population. It is said that 100,000 people have been killed and 1 million displaced. We can ask the question whether there is any resistance to Netanyahu within Israel. His government is the most right-wing government ever to have been formed in Israel. And I will refer you here briefly to the views of Ehud Olmert, who is the former Israeli Prime Minister, who said in an interview lately that Netanyahu should resign or he will be forced to resign. On the question of Israel's failure of intelligence because of the strikes, Hamas' strike, he said no, it was not a failure of intelligence. It was an outcome of the arrogance of the present government. They believed that nobody could touch them and nobody could strike at them. And he said further, Netanyahu is history, he is done. He also said that he was scared of the Israeli government, scared of this group of thugs, violent, Messianic thugs, irresponsible person Netanyahu, who is leading the state of Israel. Some dissent can also be seen in the columns of the Tel Aviv newspaper Haaretz, which sometimes takes an anti-settler and anti-occupation line. I watched yesterday the statement of the United Nations Secretary General at the Rafah border between Gaza and Egypt. He said that he spoke with a broken heart. And he said that the 2 million people in Gaza had no water, no food, no medicine, no fuel. They are under fire constantly. On the other hand, on the other side of the border, in Egypt, there were trucks loaded with water, food and medicine. And he described these trucks not only as trucks, but as lifelines, urging that the border should be opened as soon as possible to overcome the humanitarian crisis. And he described Egypt as a fundamental pillar of support and hope, stating that he hoped that there would be a two-state solution. The recent strike against the major hospital in Gaza, where people had taken refuge, killed 500 people, and it has also flattened the Al-Omari Mosque, the Grand Mosque in Gaza, and also the church. It is significant that no country wants to take the Palestinian refugees. The countries surrounding Gaza, Jordan for instance, or Egypt, do not want those refugees. And they might also not be willing to go for fear that they might not ever come back to their homes again. What is the prospect of peace in the Middle East? There are many players. There is Hezbollah, which is said to possess 150,000 rockets, but one never knows with these figures. And of course there are the major international players like the United States and the United Kingdom and their allies. So to discuss all these issues, we have three distinguished speakers today. The first speaker, it is my pleasure to introduce him, is Ambassador Mustafa Kamal Kazi. He was Pakistan's ambassador to Russia, the Netherlands, Indonesia and Iraq, and also Pakistan's permanent representative to the Organization for the Prohibition of Chemical Weapons. Because of his erudition and knowledge, he is much sought after by all think tanks throughout the world, in many parts of the world. Like, for instance, the World Political Forum in Istanbul, the World Economic Forum in Davos, in Tehran, also dialogues, security dialogues in Prague and in Leipzig, Germany. Recently, he was in Xi'an, in the People's Republic of China, in the Euro-Asia Economic Cooperation Forum. He has been acting foreign secretary, and he has been highly regarded by all think tanks, not only in Pakistan, but as I said, throughout the world. It is my pleasure to give him the floor.
Ambassador Dr. Mustafa Hassan, ladies and gentlemen. First of all, thank you very much, Ambassador Dr. Mustafa Hassan, for giving me the opportunity to join other distinguished members of the panel to share my thoughts, as also my deep anguish at the Israel's barbaric destruction and genocide in Gaza. My greetings to Ambassador Ghori, joining us from Canada. Dr. Mustafa has given us very good resume and introduction to the situation. I will focus on the crisis. Palestinians have, as you all know, continuously struggled for justice since more than 7 decades, when they were forced out of their homeland, deprived of their land, and subjected to unceasing repression, arbitrary arrests, and collective punishment. For 2 weeks now, all Gaza is under military siege, and electricity, water, and all humanitarian aid channels have been cut off, as Dr. Mustafa explained in her introduction. The entire population of Gaza is being collectively punished by indiscriminate Israeli attacks. The ongoing Israeli onslaught in Gaza has produced heart-rending images and statistics. The cruel happenings in Gaza and rest of the occupied Palestine are part of a well-calibrated policy of ethnic cleansing. Palestinians are forcibly displaced and isolated in enclaves where they are governed by rules that ensure their continuous dispossession and subjugation. The oppressive rules that govern Palestinian lives do not apply to the settlers who live on the hills above and all of the confiscated houses next to them. Israel's never-ending and ever-intensifying aggression against innocent Palestinians involves settler violence, human rights atrocities, desecration of Muslim holy places, and most vicious form of apartheid. The much condemned Nazi Holocaust of the Second World War was an outcome of a conflict involving 50 countries with more than 100 million soldiers fighting battles in Europe, Africa, and Asia. There can be no comparison in the scale and the stakes involved in that conflict. But speaking in proportional terms, the Holocaust inflicted by Israel on just 7 million Palestinians exceeds in death, destruction, ethnic cleansing, genocide, and war crimes. Israel is the only country in the world which still has no officially defined national territory, as Dr. Mustafa pointed out in her introduction. What actually defines Israel are expressions such as occupation, apartheid, settler colonialism, blockades, and ethnic cleansing. Therefore, it is not a country or a state, but basically an ever-expanding colonial project. Continuously, for more than 7 decades, Palestinians have been forced out of their homeland, deprived of their properties, and subjected to unceasing repression, arbitrary arrest, and collective punishment. For 16 years, the conditions under which 2.3 million inhabitants have been living in Gaza are no different from those of Nazi concentration camps. They have faced Israeli-imposed blockages and inhuman restrictions, making their lives unlivable. Not surprisingly, therefore, Palestinian resistance group Hamas emerged to attempt breakout of the world's largest concentration camp in modern history. Each time, Israel's ferocious and indiscriminate retaliation adds yet another savage episode to the Palestinian tragedy. Each Israeli onslaught is more intense and wide-ranging than the previous one. The current wave of war crimes has no parallel in modern history. The desecration of Islam's third holiest place of worship, the Al-Aqsa Mosque and compound, and tear gassing and firing on worshippers are a shameless routine. So also, fanatical Israeli thugs in and out of uniforms, evicting Palestinians from their homes. Clearly, Israel's sinister aim is to impose ethnic supremacy in occupied Palestine and to expel or crush Palestinians with inhuman efficiency. Not only that, Israel also wants to subjugate neighboring countries and dominate the entire region. Unqualified support by the US and other Western countries for Israel on this occasion, as also in the past, despite humanitarian catastrophe in Gaza, makes them abettors in the Israeli war crimes. President Biden's totally one-sided statement endorsing Israeli barbarism, and that too in the backdrop of Israeli bombing of the Al-Ali hospital, which caused more than 500 deaths, was adding fuel to fire. It was unbecoming on the part of a leader of most powerful country in the world, with close allies on the other side of the divide as well. Right to struggle for freedom against occupation is well recognized under international law, UNGA resolutions, and legal legacy of struggle against colonialism. The Washington and its allies accepted to be so. In case of Ukraine, to justify their proxy war against Russia, but it denies in case of Palestine. There can be no greater hypocrisy and double standards. The USA even vetoed a UN Security Council resolution which sought not ceasefire, but just humanitarian pauses in Israel's bombing for medicines and other essential life-supporting supplies to enter Gaza. Washington has monopolized stewardship of the Palestine-Israeli peace process since Oslo Accords, settlement which directly or indirectly harmed the prospects of peace in the region are: number one, fateful combination of events after 9/11 tragedy, leading to invasion and occupation of Afghanistan and Iraq. Number two, President Trump's fateful abandonment of nuclear accord with Iran, called JCPO, PIIA, making Iran free to raise uranium purification to higher level, thereby raising the interest of other regional countries towards greater competitive interest in nuclear technology. Number three, the so-called Abraham Accords, which were brainchild of an amateur strategist, Trump's son-in-law, Jared Kushner, and signed by United Arab Emirates, Bahrain, Morocco, and Sudan. But these countries were in no position to advance because of settlement of Palestinian-Israeli issue. On the contrary, these accords triggered Palestinian fears and desperation that now even the Arab governments were abandoning them through American inducement or coercion. This unity amongst the Arab countries is a factor which dilutes their strategic and economic power potential. Arab League has 22 member states, out of which 6, namely Iraq, Yemen, Syria, Libya, Sudan, and Somalia, have been crippled by conflicts. Sudan was even dismembered and partitioned. Arab League was founded with an objective to develop close relations amongst the member states. But this record speaks for itself. Very disturbing reports have emerged during the current crisis that some Arab countries spy on the poor Palestinians and report to Israeli intelligence. This needs some soul searching. Furthermore, geostrategic and geoeconomic asymmetry in the Arab world does not help. Cash-rich countries with limited geographic, and in some cases even historic significance seek to play a role which is much beyond the scope of their national power potential. Just imagine what would be the fate of Europe if security and defense doctrines were laid down by Monaco, Liechtenstein, or Angola instead of France, Germany, Spain, Italy, or Britain. American-led invasions, and military actions in at least 7 Muslim countries during the past 23 years resulted more than 1 million dead and around 37 million displaced. It was a clear signal to the Muslim world where they stood in a West-dominated world. Afghanistan was presented back to Taliban with bonus of billions of dollars of military equipment. These wars did nothing to achieve. Rather paradoxically, in hindsight, these wars proved to be counterproductive for Washington also. As I mentioned, Afghanistan was presented back to Taliban with bonus of billions of dollars of military equipment. Iraq is now close ally of Washington's prime adversary in the region, Iran. This strategic transformation gave welcome space to Chinese diplomacy to broker Saudi-Iran deal. Killing of Gaddafi and consequent collapse of Libya opened floodgates of refugees from Africa to Europe. Destabilization of African countries in the region created conditions for a series of anti-West military coup. But it seems no lessons will ever be learned. Islamophobia will continue to flourish in the US-led West. Thank you, Madam.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Sahib. We can take the discussion from there to the next speaker, Ambassador Karamatullah Ghori, who has been Pakistan's ambassador in many countries: Turkey, Iraq, Kuwait, Algeria, Mali, and Mauritania. He is also a much celebrated author. He has 10 published works, and some of his books, especially the book Barish Anasai, which is written in Urdu, which profiles his interaction with the leaders with whom he worked during the course of his career, has gone into the 5th edition. He has 2 collections of short stories and 2 collections of poetry and 2 collections of elegiac poetry. He has also written a travelogue on China, and there is also a collection of short stories in English which is called China Doll and was published from Beijing. He was the first foreign diplomat in China. His work was published by the state publishing house. Karamat has a special association with this institute, about which I'm sure he will say a few words. Over to you, Karamat.
Thank you very much, Masuma. I'm doing this from a distance of 10,000 miles. For you in Karachi, it's good afternoon, but for me, it's just the crack of dawn here. So you have forced me to get up early. I'm a late bird. I don't go to bed before 3 in the morning. So, how much time do I have?
15 minutes. 15 minutes.
Masuma, how much time do I have?
15 minutes.
15 minutes. 15 minutes?
15 to 20 minutes. बताओ ना उनको.
I think there's some problems, some technical problem now. I'm not sharing the loud and clear. Anyway,
Can you hear me now?
yes, I can hear you now.
You want 15 to 20 minutes, Karamat?
Yeah, thank you, Masuma. It's 20 minutes to 8 in my clock. I should be finishing by 8 o'clock in the morning. Anyway, it's a great pleasure to share the platform with my old colleague, Ambassador Mustafa Kamal. What a coincidence that he has preceded me on this platform in addressing this forum. He was also my predecessor in Baghdad. So I have inherited this platform from him, as well as I did my embassy in Baghdad way back in 1996. I don't know, I do too well to associate any conspiracy theory with you, but what a coincidence that you have planned this discourse on the suffering of our Palestinian brothers in the occupied territories on precisely the way when Pakistan has been blighted with the arrival of a politician who doesn't enjoy that sterling reputation in Pakistan. But this is probably a coincidence. Going back to our subject, I don't know how much the audience is aware of the historical context of this dispute between the Palestinians and the Israeli occupiers of their land, which is the crux of the problem that they are facing with it and the world is witnessing. I don't know how many of you amongst the audience have been watching this tragedy unfolded since Hamas dared into the occupied territory and took Israelis completely by surprise by attacking them on precisely the date which happened to be the 50th anniversary of the 1973 Yom War between Israel and Egypt. That day, on the 7th of October 1983, the Egyptians had taken Israel by utter surprise, by total surprise, by crossing the Suez Canal and attacking that defense line, which Israelis had come to compare with the historic Maginot Line of France, which the Nazi incursion into France had broken way back in 1939, and thus the Egyptians war, the Israeli-Medina line, the Gaza line in 1973 with their daring attack. The Western world has, since that incident on 7th of October, 10 days ago, has been presenting this incursion of Hamas fighters into occupied territory as a violation of international law, as an aggression, because Hamas, in their book, is a terrorist organization. This is the pattern which the Western world has developed since 9/11, and no coincidence that Benjamin Netanyahu, the Zionist Prime Minister of Israel, instantly branded Hamas's incursion into the occupied land, into Israel, as a reenaction of 9/11, as a modern version of 9/11, in order to gain sympathies of the Americans in particular and of the Western world in general. But let me put it in the historical context, because all the effort in the Western world is to decontextualize and de-historicize the dispute between the Palestinians and the Israelis. Let us go back to a century. In fact, I would go back 1,000 years to the commencement of the Crusades, which started in the final year of the 11th century, and to my mind, in my analysis, has continued to date. Remember, George W. Bush had said when 9/11 happened in 2001, he said it was the Crusades coming back to our civilization, to our civilized world. So the Western mind has never forgotten the lesson of the Crusades. Why it is and most people will not remember their history, will forget their history, who draw no lessons from history, are accordingly being condemned to repeat it. And remember what has been said about repetition of history. When history repeats itself for the first time, it is a tragedy. When it repeats itself the second time, it's a calamity. So, going back to the Crusades, the emperor, the Byzantine emperor, when he was besieged by the Turks, by the invading Turks, who had occupied by them much of what today is Anatolia, had pleaded with their Pope, the Catholic Pope, who happened to be a French man, that heathens who had occupied the Holy Land of Palestine 5 centuries ago were threatening to undo his Byzantine Empire. And he appealed to the Pope to come to his aid. And that was the beginning of the Crusades, because the Pope assembled all the princes of Europe in a place in France called Clermont. And there he told them that Jesus Christ had given them assurance that all those who took part in this battle against the heathens, this is the terminology used against Muslims, in control of Palestine were called as Hebrews, just as the Western world has routinely described the Palestinian freedom fighters as terrorists. This is the adage which has been coined since 9/11 that all freedom fighters are terrorists if they happen to be from the Islamic world. This is the terminology that the French occupiers used against the Algerian freedom fighters, and I can see that while against the French colonists, the Algerians lost 1.5 million freedom fighters. That is the price that one has burning in their hearts, they have to pay this price. Being referenced in a number of seminars and conventions, in 7th October incidents, locally, in person and also online, and Gaza, largest open air prison in the world, and Masuma described to you the territory, which is only 41 kilometers long and 12 kilometers at its widest. This is home to 2.2 million Palestinians, and they have been kept under constant siege for the past 16 years by an oppressor, by a genocidal Israeli government, which is not prepared to give them any human rights, of which its Western supporters constantly propagate. The only description that you hear in the Western world about Israel is that in the midst of autocratic Arab regime, Israel is the only democracy, and therefore, in their analysis, Israel must be given all due and undue credit for being the only functional person in the world, in the region of Middle East. But then, for this title of being the only democratic state in the region, Israel has been exacting a heavy toll in human rights from the besieged Palestinians. 6 million Palestinians live in the occupied West Bank, where they have no human rights at all. They have been reduced to 400 ghettos, which are disconnected from each other. On the other hand, since the 1993 Oslo Accord, Israel has established 220 settler colonies on the Palestinian land. 600,000 settlers, most of them Americans and Russians, are living in those settlements, and they have full freedom to make life hell for the Palestinians living in their neighborhood. There are so many descriptions about life of the Palestinians, but the best, to my mind, has been written by a famous Israeli academician, Ilan Pappé has written a seminal book, Ethnic Cleansing of Israel. And Israeli establishments and its Western supporters were so incensed when this book came out that Ilan Pappé was chased out, literally chased out of Israel, and he sought refuge in Britain, where he has since been a professor of international relations at the University of Exeter. He has written another book, The Biggest Prison in the World, on the life of Palestinians in Gaza. These two books are highly interesting, highly engrossing, especially for those who would like to know the genesis of the Israeli-Palestinian dispute. Going back to where I started from, the Western world has been describing the Hamas going into occupied land as a terrorist operation. It has been told, and the Palestinians have been ridiculed for being the aggressors against Israelis. What is the aggression here? There is no aggression. It is not even a war. It is the Palestinians struggling for their fundamental rights of freedom, for liberty, because they have been living under Israeli bondage for the last 70 years, for the past 75 years. So, 1948 establishment and foundation of Israel, which was founded under a Western concord, and the design being that they wanted to create a Western colony in the heart of the Arab world. The Arabs have described Israel, the birth of Israel, as a dagger drawn into the heart of the Arab world. But the reality is that the Arabs surrounding Israel were not being of much help to their Palestinian brothers. In fact, my association with the Palestinians goes back to more than 60 years, since 1959, when I went as a student to the American University in Beirut and came in contact with the Palestinians. I was appalled to see the misery in which they were being kept in Lebanon and today. You may have heard of the two Palestinian refugee camps in Saad and Shatila in Lebanon. And these were the places in 1982 where Israelis allowed their alliance allies free run over these refugee camps. So the Arab perception of the Palestinian problem is a burden on them. And the question special and that is very focusing on this Arab rebels and Palestinian rebels. The Abrahamic accords, which my colleague Mustafa referred to, is precisely the creation of this discord between the Arab rulers and Palestine. capital on the Americans have been working one to induce the fundamental rights the Palestinians. You have read the analysis about the impact of this Hamas daring into land, which has practically nullified those efforts which were underway. In fact, they were at the to induce Saudi the most important country amongst the Arabs to recognize the reality of Israel and establish diplomatic relations with it. What followed, the spillover from the Hamas incursion into the Palestinian occupied land has all but snuffed out that initiative to force Saudi Arabia to convince Saudi Arabia to formal diplomatic relations with Israel. So that is, my dear friends, the context. The Palestinians are not aggressors. They have a legitimate claim against Israel. Israel is the occupier. Israel is responsible for creating an apartheid state on the land of the Palestinians. Israel is guilty of ethnic cleansing of Palestinians from their own land. You cannot come up with another instance in world history, in the recorded history of mankind, where a people have been dispossessed not only of their land, but living on their land like prisoners, like second-class citizens, like untouchables who are worthy of no human rights, who are worthy of no human freedom. This is a tragedy which has been knocking on the conscience of the world. It's the Western world called itself a civilized world, but it is not prepared to give any rights to the Palestinians who have been dispossessed of their land, of their human rights for the past 100 years. The story began with the British in 1917 when they declared the establishment of a Jewish homeland in Palestine. And Palestine was described in that Balfour Declaration. In fact, there was no mention of the Palestinians in Balfour Declaration. It is a very, very precisely worded, only 67 worded declaration from the British government in 1917, which did not mention that Palestine was a land which had been inhabited for more than 1,000 years by its original people, the Palestinians. All that it mentioned was that this Jewish homeland will be without prejudice to the civil and religious rights of the local inhabitants. There is no mention of Palestinian political rights in that declaration. And so that tradition has been followed judiciously by the Western world. They do not mention. You may have read and heard all kinds of commentaries on how the Palestinian terrorists have violated the international law by invading Israel. but there was no mention, there is no mention in the Western world, in the Western media, of why Hamas was forced to attack Israel, because Israel has been reserving their freedom, their liberty for such a long time, and it is about time that the world came to realize that the fundamental cause of the problem is occupation, and occupation within stifling in all interpretations of the word is stifling.
Thank you very much, Karamat. I have to butt in here. Can you wind up?
Yes, I'm done. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Karamat. This time you have not mentioned your association with the Institute, but I will do it for you.
I thought much of our audience would know that my association with PIIA and with you in particular, my association with Masuma Hassan goes back to the early 60s when we were both students at Karachi University. ये उस वक्त का जिक्र है जब आतिश जवान था और ये मासूमा दो आतिशा थी. And then I had the good fortune of joining PIIA as a research officer. There were three of us at that time when Masuma's father, the late Father Sarwar Hassan, was secretary of the institute, and there were three of us working under him. My friend Mustafa, who is mashallah still active, still alive, still contributing. There was Khalida, who unfortunately expired young, and yours truly. I had a wonderful time back here. I do not never hesitate to mention that what I am as a student of international relations, as an observer, as a commentator of international relations and international affairs, is all because of that foundation made at the Pakistan Institute of International Affairs under the very inspiring and at times very exacting stewardship of late Father Sarwar. No, it's not really a matter of pride for me, but always a pleasure to describe my persona as one of the friends of Dr. Masuma Hassan, who has excelled herself not only as a scholar, but many of you may know or may not know that she was once part of our foreign service community. She served ably as our ambassador in Australia.
Thank you so much. The reason I brought this in was that it is a matter of great pride, Karamat, that you started your career from here, and it's always a pleasure to listen to you. The third speaker today is Can I ask the audience to ask me any question that they may have on their mind? You can come back in a little while because Professor Talat Wizarat will speak now. In the meantime, you can have a cup of coffee.
I should have mentioned that she too is a former colleague from the Department of International Relations of Karachi University, and she is also, I feel proud to tell her our friend.
Professor Dr. Talat Aisha Wizarat is a very well-known scholar of international relations. She was
The voice is again breaking.
she worked at she was the former chairperson of the Department of International Relations at the University of Karachi and former head of the Department Center for Policy and Area Studies at the Institute of Business Management. She is a much sought after speaker in many institutions dealing with security issues and international affairs and has delivered lectures all over the country in many institutions. She is also a frequent expert on TV channels, and she was part of Meen Rana, the dialogue, the informal dialogue between Pakistan and India, and other track 2 dialogues. She has also written a book recently on CPEC, which was published and has been highly acclaimed. Professor Talat Wizarat.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Dr. Masuma Hassan. It's always a pleasure to visit the Institute. It reminds me of my youth. It reminds me of the days when I felt that I should do something and I will do something, but many dreams remain unrealized. So I think some of my dreams, my ambitions were realized and some have still to be realized. I consider myself 76 years young. So, Ambassador Dr. Masuma Hassan, Ambassador Mustafa, Ambassador Ghori, the illustrious members of Institute of International Relations, I feel immensely proud to sit here in front of you and to talk about some issues which are very close to my heart. To be very frank with you, I do feel depressed these days when I think about children who are going hungry, when I think about people who are without a drop of water in their house, and above all, people who I fear might lose hope. That is the worst that can happen to anyone, to lose hope. But looking at the history of Palestinians, I think that is not going to happen, inshallah. Palestinians have been very resilient people, very brave people, and they have fought for more than 75 years. You see, their agony started way back when the First World War came to an end and our beloved Palestine was occupied by the British in the garb of mandatory system. I regard mandatory system to have been a form of colonialism. That is what it really was. The best part of being the last speaker is that the background which I wanted to have when I talk about these recent issues is there. It was very ably presented by Dr. Masuma and by the two ambassadors we were lucky to have today. So I don't have to go into the background. Professor Shamim Akhtar taught me Middle East course and he was very, in love with the subject. And when he lectured, it seemed like everything was happening in front of our eyes. He talked at length about Balfour Declaration, what it did to the Palestinian people. So it reminds me of him also today. He would have been here, sitting here, had he been alive. Now, when I feel depressed, when I feel sad, I tell myself one thing, and I think when you feel sad, you should also tell yourself that history takes its own course, and when people decide not to give up, then history accommodates them. You see, apartheid has been abolished from everywhere, but it remains, it has been abolished in its most crude form from the world, from South Africa. It will be abolished from Palestine also. The days of colonialism are over. Any form of colonialism, settler colonialism, other forms of colonialism, though of course we know that no colonialism has come in its place, but that is because the developing countries, the Muslim countries are not united. So that, with that kind of background, I wanted to answer the question as to why Hamas did what it did on October 7th. Hamas had two options. It could have, been there with folded hands in the service of US, domination, imperialism, neo-imperialism, whatever you choose to call it. And they could have tolerated everything that was happening to the Palestinians. They decided not to do that. You see what has happened in Palestine. Why did they feel so angry that they just decided to take action which was within the realm of possibilities? If you take your mind back to the war that took place in Gaza during the COVID years, it's about 3 years when that war took place in summer, and since that time I have divided that into 6 categories. These 6 categories, developments in these areas have been happening. Number 1, deliberate destruction of infrastructure in Gaza. Whenever there is something, whenever somebody, tries to argue with an Israeli occupying soldier, whenever there is some action which results in the death of an occupying soldier, the Israelis send their bulldozers and they, dig out all the roads in the area. They do all kinds of things, roads, bridges, they are their targets. The second thing is economic strangulation. A lot of people, in fact, the speakers mentioned that, there's confiscation of Palestinian land. The occupying soldiers come and uproot the olive trees. They mean a lot to the Palestinians. They are bread and butter for Palestinians. And these occupying soldiers just come and uproot the olive trees. And they also, Palestinians live by the sea, but they don't have the right to go and do any fishing there. They are totally cut off from the, water sources of that area. Number 3, demolition of homes. One day I was sitting and, watching a clip that somebody had sent me. Homes of 2-3 families were being demolished. And I tried to put myself in the place of those families, and I said, if somebody just comes and tries to demolish my house, which we built, human endeavor, financial resources, everything. So that brought tears to my eyes. We can't afford it. These little children had to go and live under open skies. So these are all violations of human rights, and I would call them war crimes. Number 4, daily killings. You know, from an average of 4-5 people were killed every day. This includes children, this includes old people, since that war. I mean, I'm keeping a record since that war 3 years back, but this has been happening even before that. Number 4, destruction of schools. And I take this very seriously because I think this is an effort to blacken the future of Palestinian children, Palestinian nation. I don't remember the name of the person, but someone said once that if you want to destroy a nation, destroy their educational system. And Professor Shamim Akhtar, whom I mentioned a few minutes back, once he said that Palestinians have 99% literacy rate, which was much more than ours. And he said that they have made good use of the services that were provided to them. Now, Israel is making an effort to completely, finish their future, to create a nation of illiterate people, because knowledge is power, and they know that if Palestinians have this power, they'll create a future for themselves. And the role of settlers are a very deadly group. I consider them to be some variety of beasts. Honestly, I mean, if you look at their behavior, I'm not name calling, but their attitude is very negative, and they try to destroy whatever comes in their way, if that is Palestinian. So these are the reasons. Hamas did not have a choice. Either they could have allowed all this to happen to its logical end, or they could do whatever they could, whatever was in the realm of possibilities, and they chose the second option. And Israel is trying to do one thing, and that is, they may say that openly sometimes, they may not say that, but they are trying to rid Gaza of its real people, of its real population. They want Gaza the population to leave Gaza so that they can occupy that like the rest of Palestine, which they have done. How will this whole thing, now, things have started. How will all this affect the Muslim world? How will it affect the Western world? And I will relate it to world peace. Will this increase? Will this area of conflict increase further? Or will something happen, some magic, some miracle, and things will get back to normal? I think as far as Islamophobia is concerned, it has definitely increased among some people. Recently, a 6-year-old, very sweet, very beautiful Palestinian boy was killed in the U.S. Yes, and the U.S. considers itself to be a kind of, symbol of, icon of idealism and human rights. They are nothing of the sort. I was deeply hurt when I saw this, and I know what mothers and fathers of little children in the US must be feeling now. Anyway, so at one level, Islamophobia has increased, and I think that tiny fringe, the white supremacists, and most people will become even more extreme in future. But the silver lining is that there are people who are siding with Palestinians. They live in the West, they are paying a price for siding with the Palestinians, but they are doing it. You know, you look at demonstrations, they are not only Palestinians, they are not only Muslims. There are people of all religions. Even Jews have opposed Israel. They say that Israel is an apartheid state. They draw a distinction between Zionism and Judaism. Nobody is against Judaism, but Zionism is a real source of conflict and trouble on this planet. I've said this, generally the people are very supportive of Palestinians, even if they can't do anything, even in the West. If they can't do anything, some of them are being punished now for taking part in pro-Palestinian demonstrations. On the one hand, the West wants to present itself as a defender of democracy, and on the other hand, they adopt this behavior, which I would never call democracy or democratic behavior. I've talked about harassment of demonstrators. Does that mean internal divisions in the West will increase? There are some signs of that. On the one hand, there will be these extremists who want to finish everyone who came from some foreign country. On the other hand, there are people who have broad minds, who have vision. So I think this might happen. As far as Muslim-Western relations are concerned, I don't think Muslim rulers really care about human rights or things of that kind, but there is a compulsion. The people are very angry. If they don't do any, cosmetic kind of, they don't adopt those cosmetic measures, their people will vent all their anger on these rulers. So recently we came to know that MBS made Blinken wait for a long time, and he did not meet him for one day, and the next morning when he came to meeting and the meeting took place, he lectured him on the need to do something about this issue. King Abdullah of Jordan also, cancelled a meeting with Biden, and Biden said that he felt so insulted that he is not going to visit Jordan anytime. Then, of course, Israeli-Saudi agreement is likely to be, Saudi Arabia was ready to go ahead with it, but now I don't think they'll be in a position to do that for a very long time. Even if they decide to do it, ultimately they'll not be able to do it anytime soon. I'm happy about one thing. While I was writing my book, I developed a kind of understanding of China's soft power. And I think this soft power of China is now very visible in the Middle East. The recent conference, 10 years of BRI, which took place in Beijing recently, 130 countries attended that, although there is pressure. Okay, in Dawn I thought they wrote 130 anyway. It's a very large number, 140 is even larger. So this is a very good development. China and Russia had relations with most of these Middle Eastern countries, but now China has made a very good beginning there. I'm told that all the members of Arab League are now associated with BRI in one way or another. And so the main issue has still not been mentioned by me, and that is what are the immediate challenges. These are all long-term things. I feel that a new world order is emerging. I've tried to say that in my book also, and I believe so. But we can't wait for that world order to emerge and then to settle the issues of Palestinians. Actually, we've lost a lot of time, and Palestinians are waiting for water, food, electricity, medical help. Israel has attacked hospitals. Israel has attacked schools. So this issue has to be resolved. How will it be resolved? Should this, sanctions or this control of territory and cutting off of all these facilities from the Palestinians, should it be broken militarily? Should Muslim countries send their armies to break that? I don't think. I can dream about it, but I don't think this is likely to happen very soon. And something has to be done very quickly. And the other way is a combination of military and diplomatic efforts. I think Muslim countries should at least gather this much courage. They should tell the U.S. U.S. has rejected all proposals of, doing something about this issue, providing assistance to them. Ceasefire. Everywhere they are interested in ceasefire, but when it comes to Gaza, they are not interested in ceasefire. I think all 57 members of OIC should tell the U.S. that if the U.S. does not change its attitude, they are all going to break relations, diplomatic relations with U.S. Considering the present state of fear, it seems like a dream, but giving a threat would be effective, I think. If all of them do it, if one country says we'll break diplomatic relations, there's a break. And but if all of them talk about it, then it's going to present a different scenario. So I think for their own good, if they think that Gaza is going to suffer and that is going to be the end of the story, it's not going to end there. Israel and U.S. will, it was mentioned here that U.S. has already destroyed 6-7 Muslim countries in a span of 23 years. They will not stop here. They feel very encouraged if they succeed in killing all the people who live in Gaza, or most of them, and that will create a credible. But I think that this conflict will reach its logical conclusion. Those who stand with the people of Gaza will be standing with history, and history doesn't stop for anyone. And those who don't do anything, I think, apart from the fact that their own conscience will make them feel very uncomfortable, I think ultimately, they'll be darkening their own future. So let me just conclude. I have also taken, I was thinking, why are people taking more time? I've also taken more than my normal time. So let me conclude here. The idea is to make all of us think about what is going to be the best solution, how we can reach that solution. Thank you very much.
Dr. Talat Wizarat's book is called Belt and Road Initiative, Emerging World Order. It's just been published recently. I'll open the floor to questions and answers. Just a minute, please. I will open the floor to questions and answers. Ambassador Baloch. Welcome.
Thank you all for really organizing this timely seminar. Believe me, I was just thinking a night before I received your next morning this message that you're having it. Wonderful. And I think the
expose given by our seniors, ambassadors and Madam Wizarat were really very informative. But since we are in a stage where there's a war of narratives and sound bites, so I'd like to just add a couple of them so that from this hall, whosoever is listening, or even if walls are listening to us, at least we should make our points. Number one, the biased Western media coverage of the death and destruction in Gaza, inflicted by Israelis, are reported as killed. The Palestinians are killed while the Palestinians die. Correction, other way around. They are saying the Israelis are being killed while so nobody is killing them. So I think we have to take note of it, and I think make a description and tell the Western media that we understand what you mean by this change of sound bites. Then is one of the, I think, largest misuse of people power in the US. It must be condemned, and I think the world must stand with that, and especially by that power which so-called is a citadel of democracy and a rule-based order. That has to be, I think, exposed. What is happening in Gaza is genocide and ethnic cleansing, nothing more, nothing less. I think this kind of a sound bite must go out from all where we get together to the world, that we understand what it is. Next, the world in general and Muslim world in particular would be held responsible by history equally for not doing enough. And of course, those Western powers now even providing weapons at this very time when the genocide is being committed are equal perpetrators of this heinous crime to the humanity. Yeah, I think these are kind of things I thought I'll just submit. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ambassador Saab. Ambassador Saab, could you
I would like to ask question to Ambassador Mustafa Saab. Sir, Joe Biden has said that the Hamas actually has sabotaged the upcoming agreement between Saudi Arabia and Israel, and Hamas is responsible actually to sabotage it. Why he is so much frustrated? Is it true that they have sabotaged the upcoming agreement between Israel and Saudi Arabia? And second question is, sir, what is the end of this conflict? Do you think it will further expand, or it will be die down, or it will be some other countries will actually come and they will actually accentuate the whole affair?
Yeah, very good question. I think for future we have to be very watchful of Saudi Arabia and the role of the young Prince Mohammed bin Salman. I think he's a brilliant politician for his age. He was under tremendous pressure to link up with Israel, and especially when some countries in the region have done so. Now he gave a long list, both in the bilateral context and also in the context of Palestine, which is quite complex. Quite complex. Nuclear capability, infrastructure, F-35 aircraft, which the United States doesn't want to give to any other country than Israel, and then security guarantees. In case of Palestine, the Palestinians will live in dignity. And we very cleverly played that out to stagger the things. I think it's tremendous. I admire whatever people might think about the negotiations that are going on. You see, engagement is one thing. It's always part of diplomacy. You engage. You can't say, no, get out. You have to engage. And I think he has brilliantly done that. And then, again, being young, he has whole life ahead of him. He has whole tenure as a monarch, which is going to be very long. Mashallah, God gives him life, will be long. So he has very high stake. He cannot do anything which is against the public people of Saudi Arabia. And Saudi Arabia itself is undergoing tremendous kind of a revolutionary transition. So this is a delicate time for Saudi Arabia, not to sort of disturb, but to get on in a very brilliant manner. So I think as far as Mohammed bin Salman is concerned, I think he's the only pope who will have genuine issue. And other country that needs to be praised also is Qatar. Look at this small country. It has this Algeria, which is very powerful, both Arabic and English. They have played a key role in the reconstruction in Gaza every time that is destroyed. They financially supported, and without being part of the Abraham Accords, you see. I think it's a brilliant move. So these two countries, I think, in the regional Arab context, because Arab issue, the Palestine issue, if you see in the past history, has been exploited by the Arab leaders outside, and the Palestinians have left the resolution of the Palestine issue to outsiders with international support. Now, this is the time when outsiders and regional countries have left them alone. They have taken up. I think freedom is never coming from anybody outside, but freedom comes with their own strength, with their own struggle. And that's why there can be some good Palestinians also, but that's going to take long. Well, I think I think this level is, in my view, Israelis are not going to do the ground invasion, not to get into Gaza, because that can lead them to quite a disaster. It's not. Well, as the question is of entry into Gaza, Now, they are, of course, on the border. They are there. Another thing that also needs to be borne in mind is the huge oil and gas reserves along the coast of Gaza. Now that is going to be a very contested issue. Gaza is going to be a very contested issue. That is something. But the question is that there are 7 million Palestinians occupied and also in Israel, and 7 million Israelis, the Jews. So it's not something easily to be wished away, but it's going to be a long struggle. And thank you.
My name is Mustafa. I am privileged to be associated with this institute for more than 5 decades when Khan was the chairman. My question is from Ambassador Mustafa. If I understood him properly, he said that America has handed over
since the Vietnam War, the United States has not won any war. They've lost a lot. And these were the recent examples. And you don't overthrow Taliban. You don't overthrow an entity and then negotiate. By negotiation, this power was not a surprise. It was negotiated. And also, of course, there were weaknesses because those who were managing Afghanistan for the Americans had their roots. Their families were living outside Afghanistan. The Taliban were the only political entity who were having the local indigenous roots and who could fight for the country. But those office bearers who were ministers or, in important positions, they were the families outside in the West, mostly in the United States. So they didn't have much stakes, if you see, because how the President ran away, But Kazi stayed back. You see, the question is of roots. If you have roots, you stay back. If you don't have roots, you run away.
So pleased to hear the excellent discourse by our senior colleagues, Ambassador Mustafa Sahab and Ambassador Karamat and Dr. Talat. I had been working with Ambassador Karamat Sahab when I was posted in Kuwait for 4 years. I learned a lot, of course. We learn from each other also, but since senior colleagues have spoken on the subject, I have only one simple question. We have talked about Muslims, what Muslims should do what OIC should do in this situation. Now, every country is coming up with routine diplomatic statements. I have not heard any country with, except, Iran has said something, or Turkey, or one or two other countries. But I am coming to Pakistan. What should be the policy of Pakistan in this current scenario? We should not come up with routine statements. We should come up with a policy now. This is the time. We are saying the two states and this other thing, so whatever the statement they issued by the Foreign Office, I think we should come up now. As you have said, that which are the countries, which Muslim country? Pakistan is the leader in the Muslim countries. We are the only nuclear power. In 60s, we fought for with these people. Our pilots flew their planes over there. How can you forget this history? We should come forward, and my request is that we should come forward. Now, I want to know the views of all three speakers, my esteemed speakers. What should be our policy options now? Thank you.
I think the policy that has been adopted by the government, as we can see from the Foreign Office statement and the also statement of the Foreign Minister, caretaker Foreign Minister, that is quite satisfactory. And the question is, the lead is always with the Arab countries. We can't overtake them in taking the lead. And also another question is leadership. Now, if you go back to 73 war, and our role there, and we sent pilots who sort of struck 2 or 3 Israeli aircraft who shot down, and they were the only ones who shot down Israeli aircraft. No one else. Egypt and all. So that was again something that you could dream of. In 71 we were, partition. The country was divided. We went through a tremendous trauma, but there was leadership that in 72, December, Mr. Bhutto took 71, and in 73 October, he not only declared, but he sent the forces. So you need that kind of caliber of the leadership also. So we hope and pray we have that kind of a caliber in the leadership who could imagine a situation, who look at it and see an opportunity. Now that opportunity really entrenched us in the Middle East after 73. If you see, if you see past and then you see post 73 Middle East, we got entrenched. So we need leadership.
I think unless all the members of OIC decide to do something, and it's very difficult to make them decide one thing, but unless they all decide to adopt a certain policy, I don't think any one state or 5 states will do anything. They need that umbrella to act. And the other thing is that I'm not a diplomat. I've never been a diplomat. I say things that comes to my mind when it comes to my mind. But I think that diplomacy is a combination of, it's not that you always have sweet talk. In diplomacy, people threaten also. And I think if all the Muslim countries, all members of OIC, there are some who are ready to do it. But others, Pakistan, the Arab countries, I don't know, I think that people will have to convince them to do something about it. If they do that, if they threaten the US, something tells me, my reading of international relations, I started studying international relations in 1968. So I have fairly long association with world politics in that sense, no practical experience of it. But I think if all of them can get together, speak with one voice, and tell them, the Western world, that if they don't, impose ceasefire, and if they don't create a humanitarian corridor, all of them will break their relations with US. I'm talking about this. There are many Muslim countries who are not even breaking their relations with Israel. I mean, there are 7, 8 Muslim countries who have relations with Israel. I don't know what is stopping them from breaking off their relations with Israel. United States तो बाद में आएगा अगर पहले इजराइल से तो ब्रेक ऑफ कर ले.
Assalamu alaikum. My name is Fatah Khan. I am from Karachi University. I am a student of International Relation. I have a friend. She is a Palestinian and her name is Aisha, and she has a message for all of us. And it goes like this. As human Palestinians, Arabs and Muslims, we want the people everywhere to pressure their governments to change their relationship with Israel because it's settlers' colony that was built in 1948 using the same method that you are seeing in the news, ethnic cleansing and genocide. We want the world to believe in decolonizations, not only in theory but in the practice. We want the humanity to stand with us in ending this colonization that's going on for 75 years. They can do that by strikes and marches. Isn't this what they would do? They would have wanted to do if we are talking about the native people of America who were massacred by the European white supremacy. As for the places like McDonald's, Starbucks, and so on, they are literally funding Israeli occupation forces with the money, people, and praying for them, boycotting them is a human act that has nothing to do with religion. Our stance from Hamas is supportive because what they did was a reaction towards 75 years of holding the Gazans and concentrating camps. Hamas is a liberation movement. It's not right to blame the victim for defending themselves and wanting freedom for their people. If you have seen watching the news, all Gazans stands with resistance because their lives before what's happening can be barely called a life. The international supports the rights to resistance in all means and criminalize the genocide and ethnic cleansing. We live in a double-standard hypocrite world that was against the extremism of the Jews but is now supporting turning Gaza into one. Thank you.
Please thank her for the message. Please thank her.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. My name is Dr. Ahmed Raza, his player. I am highly enlightened and I am a very humble student of Dr. Talat and Dr. Tanveer Khalid, who made me do PhD. I wanted to say a lot of more, but I will be very brief. Under the prevalent circumstances, with weaknesses of the Muslim world exposed, highlighted by all my distinguished speakers, the European Union clearly siding with Israel outrightly, the United States in the full-fledged military support to Israel as never before in the history, while the rest of the whole world watching in a disgust. I suggest a solution in the light of history that we have been through, at least myself for the last 50 years, especially contained in the Bible and the Holy Quran. Palestinians should migrate to other Middle East Muslim countries along the Mediterranean Sea, the way Bani Israel were guided by Allah Ta'ala to leave Egypt for the sake of their future generations. The dilemma Dr. Talat very befittingly pointed out. So I request any distinguished member of the panel to guide me on my point of view. Thank you.
I'm of the opinion that Palestinians should not leave their land because history tells us that whenever Palestinians leave their land, they are never allowed to come back. And I don't think Palestinians want to leave their land. They want the solution, for example, ceasefire. and creation of a humanitarian corridor while they are living in Gaza. After all, they are residents of Gaza. They've lived in Palestine for I don't know how many thousands of years. So no settler can come and throw them out. This is my personal opinion. And with this, I might have to leave because my driver has to be given his duty. So this is my book, and I want to present a copy to the Institute of International Relations. I would be very happy if you accept this token from me. And I am so absent-minded. Last time I thought I already gave Dr. Sahiba a copy, but later she told me that I forgot. After all, I'm a professor. I'm in touch.
Talat, please wait for 5 minutes because we're winding up now. Please don't go away. आप कुछ कहना चाहेंगे? जो
I fully agree with Dr. Shahba. I think there are already millions of Palestinians who are outside and who are deprived, and the question, one of the questions on the agenda in the negotiations is their right to return. And if they don't return, I mean, where do they go or what happens to them? So I think that's a very good advice. And
last question to Mr. Zafar Shafik.
Thank you, ma'am. There are some independent views that Israelis believed that Hamas was in a different mode now. Israelis were of the view that Hamas focused on a long-term ceasefire with a live and let live arrangement. The arrangement probably is suitable for Netanyahu's government, which has been curbing the judiciary and undermining the liberal democracy in Israel. My question is, that is there any possibility that the adversaries would revert and restart on the basis of Camp David Accord brokered by President Clinton between Yasser Arafat and the Israelis? We must remember that the ultimate agreement was not achieved, but the key points were the continued discussions on borders, establishment of Palestinian state, and the shared sovereignty on Jerusalem. Thank you.
Karamat, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Karamat, could you briefly answer this question, but please be brief? Because I want to wind up at 6.
For the 1990 things which the questioner has none of that has been realized. In fact, after 1993, since 1993, what Israel has done is, in the words of Ariel Sharon, remember, he was the architect of the invasion of Lebanon in 1982. He is on record having said that Israelis must create threats on ground, and these threats on ground have been created in the form of several colonies which have come up on the land occupied by Israel by the settlers. So they are out to achieve their target of greater Israel. You can read there is one very interesting document called the Covenant of Elders of Zion, which was written by the Zionists in the early 20th century. They now deny the authorship of that document, which clearly states that the ultimate aim of the Zionist movement, by the way, people have been conflating anti-Semitism with anti-Zionism. These are two different things. Semitism is a religious thing. Zionism, on the other hand, is an entirely political movement which started in Europe in the late 19th century and ultimately achieved its target of a homeland for Israelis on Palestine. Their ultimate objective is making Israel covering all the lands between the two rivers, Euphrates in the east and Nile in the west. So the two-state solution which was envisaged in the Oslo Accord of 1993 is nowhere there on the ground. The Israeli objective is to create one state only for the Israelis, only for the Jews, where Jews would be first-class citizens and Palestinians and Arabs would be second-class citizens, an apartheid state which believes in genocidal superiority of the Jews over the Palestinians. That is the bottom line of it.
Thank you so much, and I will try to wrap up now, which is not an easy task considering the richness of the views that have been put across today. My own view is that I do not think that the Muslim countries or the Arab countries are going to unite on this and come out with the kinds of suggestions which have been made that they are going to break their relationship, the diplomatic relationships with Israel. They are not going to do that. They have carefully built them up and they have interests. So far as the United States of America is concerned, its Jewish lobby is so strong and it is so entrenched in its internal politics that it is not going to take another turn of any kind in favor of the Palestinians. Although Joe Biden did, in the speech he made the other day, talk of a two-state solution. There is also, as Karani just said, a very strong lobby in Israel, which is all for a one-state solution, in which the Palestinians will live still as an oppressed people. So far, I'd like to, before I wind up, I want to say that Hamas has made on many occasions an offer for a truce. For a 10-year truce. When it came to power, it made an offer for a 10-year truce. It approached George Bush, who was then president, offering a 10-year truce if Israel would somehow accept its legitimacy, the legitimacy and the Palestinian legitimacy to a state of their own. But the Israelis never agreed to that. In fact, on one occasion when Hamas made such an offer, 10 years of truce and let us leave the residual questions to future generations. They killed one of the leaders of Hamas as a result, in retaliation to that suggestion. And also, there are also murderous tendencies. Khalid Mashal was one of the founders of Hamas, and Netanyahu ordered his murder. He ordered that he should be murdered, he should be put an end to, he should be eliminated by a nerve agent. And two Canadians, two Israelis, posed as Canadian citizens, and they approached him and they delivered that nerve agent to him, and he would have died. Was it not for King Hussein, who said that if you don't give me the antidote, I'm going to put these people on trial. And so the antidote was given, because of which Khalid Mashal lived. So these are such horrific stories, and as rightly said by the panelists today, perhaps in the history of mankind, this kind of oppression and violence has never taken place. But thank you ever so much. I want to thank all the panelists, Ambassador Mustafa, Kazi, Dr. Talat Wizarat, and of course my dear friend Karamatullah Ghori, who woke up so early to be with us tonight. It was night for him actually, it was day for us. Thank you very much, and just to say that tea is served on the ground floor.